We stood in Hiroshima on a Monday morning and watched 350,000 people simply living, and then, in 43 seconds, we watched 70,000 of them disappear. We watched a second bomb fall on Nagasaki, and we left Japan on its knees beside its radios, hearing the voice of its emperor for the very first time in history. Today, we find out what Japan did with what was left to the surrender. August 15th, 1945, Emperor Hirohito, a man his people believed was divine, spoke words that no Japanese emperor had ever spoken, ever. He used a court dialect so ancient, so elevated, that many ordinary Japanese citizens could not fully understand the words, but they understood what was happening. Japan was surrendering. For a nation whose entire soul, whose military code, whose children had been raised on the belief that surrender was the deepest shame a person could carry, this was not a military defeat. It was the death of everything they believed about themselves. Soldiers in the field wept openly. Some could not accept it. Several senior officers took their own lives rather than exist inside a Japan that had yielded. But the emperor had spoken, and Japan, for the first time in its entire history, laid down its weapons. All of them. September 2nd, 1945. Aboard the USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay, Japanese representatives signed the formal instrument of surrender. General Douglas MacArthur stood at the ceremony and made a promise that most people in that room did not believe. He said, "It is my earnest hope that from this solemn occasion, a better world shall emerge." What followed was something history had never quite produced before. An occupation, not of conquest, not of punishment, but of reinvention. MacArthur understood something critical, that most of the world was not yet ready to understand. Japan was not a nation to be crushed into permanent weakness. It was a nation that could become something entirely different from what it had been. The occupation lasted 7 years. In those 7 years, Japan was remade completely. The transformation. A new constitution was written, one that Japan still lives under today. Article 9, perhaps the most radical clause ever placed into any constitution anywhere in human history, permanently renounced war as an instrument of national policy. Japan, the nation that had built its entire identity around military power, wrote war out of its own existence. Women voted for the first time. Land returned to ordinary farmers. Labor unions legalized. A free press established. Universal education expanded. In 7 years, a feudal military empire became a constitutional parliamentary democracy.
The economic miracle. American forces needed supplies, equipment, vehicles, manufactured goods, and they needed them now. Japan, sitting directly off the Korean peninsula, was positioned perfectly. Japanese factories that had been making weapons began making everything else. The money started flowing, and Japan did something with it that the world had never seen a defeated nation do. It invested, obsessively, systematically, without stopping. Technology, education, infrastructure, steel, shipbuilding, electronics, automobiles. The government and industry moved as one, targeting each sector, dominating it, then moving to the next. Toyota, Sony, Honda, Panasonic. Names that rose from the rubble of a bombed nation to become words that every person on Earth recognized within 20 years. Economists watched in disbelief. They had no framework for what Japan was doing. They gave it a name because they had no explanation. The Japanese economic miracle. Between 1955 and 1973, Japan's economy grew at an average of 10% every single year. By 1968, just 23 years after 2 atomic bombs reduced its cities to silence, Japan had become the second largest economy on Earth. Let that number land. But the numbers do not tell the whole story, because what Japan did was not just economic, it was philosophical. The Japanese people did not simply rebuild their cities, they rebuilt their entire understanding of what it meant to be Japanese. The samurai code did not disappear, it transformed. The discipline that had once built an army became the discipline that built a manufacturing system the world had never seen. Kaizen, the philosophy of continuous improvement, one small step at a time, became the foundation of Japanese industry. Monozukuri, the art of making things, treating the act of creation as a form of devotion, as worthy of the same commitment a samurai gave to his sword, gave Japanese products a quality the rest of the world struggled to match. Workers did not just build cars, they built them the way their ancestors had built temples, with total attention, with complete commitment, with pride in the smallest detail. And Hiroshima, the city that was ash on a Monday morning, was rebuilt. Not just rebuilt, reimagined. Today, Hiroshima is a city of 1.2 million people. Its streets, clean and ordered. Its rivers, the same Ota River Delta that carried the bodies of August 6th, now carry pleasure boats and host riverbank cherry blossom parties every spring. At the exact center of the blast stands the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. The only building left standing near the hypocenter was kept exactly as the bomb left it. Its broken dome, its exposed skeleton, preserved forever as a witness. The Japanese call it the Genbaku Dome, the atomic bomb dome. It stands not as a monument to hatred, but as a permanent promise that this must never happen again. Japan lost 3 million people in World War II. It had 2 cities erased in an instant. It suffered the only use of nuclear weapons in the history of warfare. And from that, it built one of the most sophisticated, educated, peaceful, and beautiful nations on Earth. The Hibakusha, the survivors, walked into schools, into government chambers, into the hearts of the people who bombed them, and said, "We will show you what this feels like, so that no one ever has to feel it again." That is not recovery. That is not resilience. That is something for which the human language has no adequate word. Japan did not survive the bomb. Japan answered it. With cherry blossoms planted over the ash, with temples rebuilt on the ruins, with a generation of children who grew up in the most peaceful version of their nation in its entire history. The petals are already falling. They have been falling since the day we were born. The question Japan answered, and the question it leaves for all of us, is not whether the petals will fall. The question is, what will you plant in the ash?